One of the very useful testing concepts we have available to us in our arsenal is a concept called mock objects. In this demonstration, I'm going to walk you through using a tool called Mockito. Mockito is a tool for Java that allows us to mock objects. Now, I'd like to start by demonstrating the program that we're about to test and showing you how the working implementation works. It's a pretty simple program. The program, as it is running, has the user type in two temperatures. So, 98.6 and 98.7. Pretty much what we would call the normal range for temperatures. And what it does is it diagnoses us as not being hypothermia, being normal, not having a fever, and not having hyperpipexia. This is basically a very, very high fever. So everything is good. Now, if we had something like 92.0 and 92.0, hypothermia, we're really cold. Or if we had something like 106.1 and 106.3, we've got a fever and we are in hyperpyrexia, very, very high temperatures. Lastly, if for some reason these two temperatures differ by extreme amounts, so let's say I had 98.6 as the first temperature read and 101.2 as the next temperature read, there's too large of a temperature differential. Something is wrong. One of these two temperature readings is not correct. Our program doesn't want to try to make a diagnosis based on these. So that's the concept of the program. Now, how is this program structured? How does it work? Let's take a look at that. So what we see on here is essentially that we have this class called the temperature analyzer. This temperature analyzer basically has an instance of the thermometer. That thermometer instance is how it actually reads the temperatures. It then has basically our four diagnoses that we can possibly have, and then essentially accessors that allow us to get at these diagnoses. We have one main method in this class that is called from outside, diagnose condition. That diagnose condition essentially goes ahead and gets the temperature calls from the thermometer and does the diagnosis for us. This thermometer interface here is just an interface here. And for us to actually write a program, we need to realize that. So we've got a realization in the console thermometer. You saw that I was typing on the console with it. The main program essentially instantiates an instance of this console thermometer and then passes this instance in as the interface to the constructor when the constructor is called, thus creating the system. Now, if we'd like to take a look at the sequence of how this all behaves, we can look at it here. So on this sequence, what we see is that the main program obviously creates this console thermometer and creates the temperature analyzer like so. In a loop right here, we diagnose the condition, which means we call this get temperature exactly twice. And then here, we look at our diagnosis as we are printing out. Now, what I would like to do in my tests is I want to verify the operation of this particular class right here, making sure that it calls this get temperature exactly twice, that it properly handles the averaging of temperatures, and that it properly throws them out if there's too large of a range. Now, if you think about it, this is something where we are now dependent upon this external console class to provide our data back. You could think of this console thermometer in realization here as essentially almost being like a data provider into this temperature analyzer. So in order to do our testing, what we are actually going to do is take this console thermometer that we've got over here and we are going to mock it, creating an object that's going to respond to our calls with data going back into our temperature analyzer and then allowing us to do our diagnosis. So right now we are looking at the raw Eclipse project here, and I need to set this project up to actually use the Mockito tools in the environment. I have already set it up as a TestNG project, so I have a default TestNG mock class set up here, but I don't have any of the things to actually allow me to use this as a mock object. So to do that, I need to import some files into our project. So I have a file here, Mockito jar files, and I'm going to open these up here, just with Windows Explorer, and we see that there are 4 jar files inside of this zip file. These jar files happen to be this ByteBuddy Agent, Mockito Core, and Object.js. These 4 files are important for us in order to actually do our mock object testing. So I'm going to take and browse to where my project is that I'm working on, which is in my development repositories, in this particular case in my demo scenario here, and I've got it in a Mockito mock object. And I'm going to just take and paste these jar files right into the project. That being completed, then I want to refresh the project, and you see these jar files are sitting right there. And I want to go into my properties for my project, and I'm going to import these jars into my project. So I will go through, select all 4 of them like so. They are now part of my project, and I can start using them for testing purposes. So the first thing that I want to do is essentially set up my mock test here. So what I'm going to need in here is essentially a temperature analyzer. I'm going to call this TA for right now. Not exactly the best acronym for it, but that's my temperature analyzer that I'm going to have. And I am going to also have in here a private thermometer interface. I'm going to call it the mock thermometer. Now, this mock thermometer is a special type of class in that it's, or a special type of system in that it's an interface that we are going to mock. So I'm going to add the mock annotation to it. Now I need to also pull that in to my project from Mockito, and I can see now that that is a mocked item that is going to be in my system. Now my data provider here is going to provide information to our given tests, and my before and after methods I want to set up and tear things down. So my before method, for example, what I want it to do is actually, in my case now, nothing for right now. After the method, what I want to do is I want to set TA to be null so that it goes away. My data provider that I'm going to have here is going to provide information to my given test. And I'm going to take this test and move it down to the bottom here, so it's right below my data provider here. Now inside of my data provider here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start defining some of my parameters that I have. So my test, what I'll have here is a float temp1, float temp2, and just for simplicity's sake right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check only for normal as to whether this would be a normal temperature or whether that normal flag should be set. Obviously, I could expand this out to all the other parameters. I just want to look at normal for right now based on this data provider that I'm going to set up here. And I'm going to call this essentially test normal. So in my test normal, what I'm going to have are a couple of different things that are going to happen here. So the first thing is that I'm going to have an expectation. So my expectation is when my mocked object, which I'm going to call mock thermometer, and I don't think I can spell, so when mock thermometer, and actually I'm going to need to import when as well, which is a annotation that I need in my scenario here. Oops, actually, I'm just going to type this out the correct and fully implemented way here. So what I'm going to have is when mock thermometer dot get temperature in degrees F is called. So I'm going to have that called, and then I'm going to have it then returns. So I'm defining essentially what the returns are for this particular call. Then return. Typed the wrong thing there. So then return temp1, temp2. So what this is saying is that I am expecting that the mock thermometer will get called twice. And the returns for each one are going to be temp1 and temp2. Now I need to make sure I can get this when taken care of, so I've got to find out why. It's because I don't have the right import here. So I've got to put the when import in there. And while I'm at it, I'm going to also add verify, which is not being used. So when mock thermometer that get temperature in degrees F is called, then return temp1 and temp2. So that's my expectation of what's going to happen with the calls. I'm then going to take and, in this case, instantiate the object to test. So the object that's going to be tested in this case is going to be the temperature analyzer. TA equals new temperature analyzer, and of course I'm going to pass in mock thermometer, which is the source for my given object. The object is instantiated. It now exists. And what I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to now run through and essentially make sure that we have this scenario where, and I'm trying to flip to the right tool because I want to, where I actually have a diagnosis of the condition. This call here being made on temperature analyzer. So I'm going to test the condition diagnosis like so. So I will call TA dot diagnose condition. Now, the diagnosed condition may throw an error. So for what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add a throws declaration to it that indicates that this test normal may throw an exception. If it does, this particular case should be causing a failure. So I'm going to test the diagnosed condition, and I'm going to assert that TA dot is normal matches with what I'm calling normal being passed in. And assert equals, that's what I wanted. And of course I need to bring that in. So I'm going to do my assertion of assert equals. And I think I clicked on the wrong input. Let's try that again here. Okay. All right, so we've got it being equals, like so. And now, the last thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this temperature call occurred exactly twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this verify method, and I'm going to verify that on the mocked thermometer, thermometer, the mock thermometer times 2 dot get temperature in degrees. So I'm making sure that this was called exactly twice. And I need to also make sure I have the correct import for times. There it is. Right here. So this again is part of the Mockito. So when verify times. This is saying that I am expecting the get temperature degrees to be called exactly twice. And if any one of these things fails, then we're going to fail the test. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some test conditions here. So my first condition is going to be 98.6 and 98.6 and true, for example, because we are normal. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to test something that's a little bit in a different range. Now the data for this, as far as the human body temperatures, came from this chart right here that I've got. So normal is 97.7 to 99.5. So what I can do is also 99.5, 99.5, that should be true. And then if I do 99.6 and 99.6, that should be false. And 99.4, 99.4. You get the picture. Here what I'm doing is a boundary value analysis on the end of normal, and I'm setting the conditions. But remember, these are the objects that are returned when I call this mock thermometer. So with this being set up, and obviously what I would do, I would want to have better names for these examples than what I have here. I can now run these. And what we will see is the mock test here. Okay, it looks like something failed. And it failed because there's a data provider mismatch. Oh, I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is. I'm going to cheat for just a moment here. Make that a double. Make that a double. And I'm going to cast these over to floats. I should have just done these as doubles in the first place, but I did them as floats. Okay, so now that I've done that fix there, now I should be able to run these tests. And we see that we had 4 failures. So what happened here? We got a null pointer exception. Line 40. Ah, I figured it out. A very important step. Before I can actually call that as a mocked method, I need to set it up as a mocked method. So what I'm going to have is my mock thermometer here. Before each one of these methods occurs, what I need to do is I need to set the mock thermometer equal to be a mock of the class that we have, which is a thermometer interface. So what this will say is I am going to mock this particular class, and then I need to import this definition for mock, like so, to cause me to be able to actually mock things like so. So the imports, just to put them all together, these are the imports that are specific to Mockito, these guys down here at the bottom. So now I have this, and we can now run this, and we had 3 of the 4 passed. So I can see what's going on. Now, which one failed? 99.4, 99.4. Oh, that failed because I provided the wrong test condition. 99.4, 99.4, that's normal by our definition. So now that I fix that, we can see that this all works properly. Now, what I could do is I could also detect if there were problems in this system. Let's say I wasn't calling the thermometer twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a change in my temperature analyzer. And what I'm going to do is I am not going to make this second call like so. I'm just going to set temp2 equal to temp1 like so. Very, very innocuous mistake. Now, what that would mean is if we look back at our sequence diagram, this second call right here would not occur. So my testing right now will actually detect this because this verify down here is going to fail because this is not going to happen 2 times. So let's see what happens when I run these tests now with that bug being present in the code. We see that 4 tests failed. The 4 tests that failed basically indicated that we won it 2 times, but we only mocked or invoked it 1 time. So this type of an error message right here indicates that we have that type of a problem. So at this point, I have demonstrated how to use the Mockito tool, and I've demonstrated the ability now to do mock objects. That brings this video tutorial to a close.